And there we go. Hi, everyone. Adriana here from the Black Heart Red Spade podcast. I've got a very special guest on board today. I've known Brad for 14 or 15 years. Our story begins when we used to work at a club in Cape Town in an area called Camps Bay. He was a barman, I was a door manager. And let's just say we always got along very well and stayed in touch over the years. Brad is a really swell guy. He's done really, really well in his field. He's someone I've got a lot of respect for, a lot of time for as well. And he founded the group called the Platinum Seed Group. You're the CEO and founder of Platinum Seed. You are the Chief Innovation and Marketing Officer of the Valenture Institute. You've helped to launch some big brands in many African countries. I think you've worked with European firms and some American firms, if I recall correctly. And it's just a pleasure to have you on, because I would love to, and the viewers I know would also love to hear from you how you use entrepreneurship and innovation and all these other aspects to create an optimal life for yourself. So Brad, welcome. Thank you for being on board.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the extremely flattering flattering introduction. I think maybe overselling a bit, but
no, I give credit where it's due. I give credit where it's due.
Maybe hopefully I can provide some insights and some value to the listeners, and I really appreciate you taking the time to chat to me as well, and great to connect again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been too long. We should actually make a point of connecting more often, because I think we, especially at this stage of our lives now as well, we can talk about more topics. There's more overlap in terms of how we can utilize the skills and experiences and things we've built up over the years, which actually leads me into my question, as in, tell us a bit more about your story. How did you go from barman studying economics to founding a digital marketing group, which is not what you would normally expect from someone who studied economics to actually go into? How did you get the idea to go into that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to keep the story brief. I think I've always had a passion for business. I was brought up in a household where my stepfather is an entrepreneur. He's self-made, and I've been brought up with a lot of values around business. And I've always had a passion for starting businesses. So it's my passion for entrepreneurship, or for business, let's call it, started when I was about 14 and 15, and I started trading shares at around that age. And I guess that kind of led me into economics, and I think, I'll take a step back. My segue has always been, I've loved creating things, and I've loved business. And when I came to a point in my life where I needed to study, I was either going to become a chef or I was going to go into business. And I guess chefs create things. They like delighting people. They're very focused on customer experience. And in business, you need to bring those values across as well, because building business is about that. It's about being extremely, in my opinion, extremely customer centric. So after leaving university, I did do a half major in marketing, so it wasn't purely economics. I went on to become the marketing manager in a group of aesthetic clinics. And aesthetic clinics are basically like where you go get like Botox treatments and like cellulite treatments. And I landed up in a very, very interesting industry. And what ended up happening was in 2009, which was mid-financial crisis, that business liquidated and actually got merged with its biggest competitor. And I basically found myself like without a job, to be blunt. I gained a lot of experience, a lot of board exposure during my time there, which was great. And then I just kind of looked at the industry, and I was like, listen, the agencies or the marketing agencies I was working with at that time were not great. The digital marketing agency I was working with at that time was really good. But digital marketing at that stage really only comprised of search engine optimization, or SEO, and pay-per-click advertising. I mean, social was only just on the rise. I actually dug up a proposal that I did in 2009, just before this call. And I think it referenced Facebook as having something stupid like 40 million users, which just shows you how small. It was probably a bit earlier. It was probably around 2008, but like just shows you like how big we thought it was, but we didn't know the extent of how big it was going to get. And then obviously the with the influx of internet and fast speed connections and those type of things blowing up, digital really grew. But my main premise for starting Platinum Seed was actually to start as a fully fledged marketing agency, which focused on growing business and really focus on ROI, because marketers tend to love using terms like brand equity and awareness and like these sort of metrics, and like no one, like, let's be honest, like most CEOs don't really know what a marketing department, or didn't really know what a marketing department did. It was kind of like, okay, like we spent like 10 million rand on like a TV ad, and like, show me the sales. They always want the bottom line. So we wanted to focus on that. And that was the premise of starting Platinum Seed. Platinum at that stage was a highly precious commodity, not so much nowadays.
It's coming back.
It's coming back. It's coming back. And a seed, we felt that every business or idea, or every business starts with a seed of thought or an idea. And it was basically growing those ideas into something precious and valuable. So that's the name, Platinum Seed, and how it came about. And very quickly we found our feet, and we segued into digital, because that's what we knew, that's what we were passionate about. I've got a strong passion for technology. And I think where we differed from a traditional agency or even digital agencies is that we were very entrepreneurial. We were always looking for solutions to potential problems. So the first thing we identified was sort of in 2012. We were a small team, I think 5 or 6 people at that stage. More around 2011. And we saw, oh, geez, there's this great company in the US called Square. I don't know how familiar you are with Square, but Square was like a mobile payment app started by Jack Dorsey, actually. He's also the founder of Twitter.
Oh, is that the one? I'm familiar with Squarespace. So that's completely different. Okay.
So Squarespace is like a website builder. Jack Dorsey, before he started Twitter, so I mean, very rare that you get someone who starts $2 billion company, but he did.
That's a company in which he's liquidating his stock now to finance the COVID fund. Yeah, gotcha. I'm not familiar with what they do, but I heard about it.
So yeah, I mean, they were basically like the first mobile payment solution, or one of the big ones in the US. Where basically what you did was you would take a little reader, you would plug it into your cell phone, or I mean, in those days, America was a big iPad sort of economy. You plug it into your iPad, you were a small merchant, and effectively you could swipe your credit card through this reader. It would then basically act as a point of sale and credit card machine, as opposed to having to go get one from a bank.
Okay.
So we thought, shit, this is an awesome idea. Like, we don't have like, we've got a huge amount of SMEs in this country. Banking's really expensive here. How can we bring this in here? And also understanding that we didn't have a huge number of iPad users. So we basically went and launched this company called Checkout in 3 months.
I remember that one.
We built a sort of minimum viable product and took it to market in 3 months. We bought in the card readers from China. We're like, yeah, we're on it. And what ended up happening was we didn't do our due diligence very well, because what happens is in America you could just do a swipe. You could swipe a card and sign. Whereas in South Africa you've got chip and pin. And no matter what we did, the card companies kind of stonewalled us. We did have many workarounds, and there was a lot of, unfortunately, in business you find that in bureaucracy you find that logic doesn't always prevail. Like, our security was probably, we probably would have had less fraud than a normal retailer, but nonetheless, we had to fail that business because chip and pin readers didn't exist in those days. The guys who then came along and got it really right after the fact were Yoko, who I'm sure you're very familiar with now. So that was great. And then, yeah, we've helped partner and launch a bunch of other businesses. We've incubated a few more. And the other one that spun off into its own business now and is running is a company called Continuon. And that's basically a social analytics and insights tool, which helps companies become more personalized and connect with their social fans, and more personalized in their marketing at scale. So yeah, that was a very long introduction, but I hope it gave you a bit of.
No, it's exactly the kind of introduction I was hoping you would give, though. And the common theme that keeps coming up, though, is pivot, adapt, optionality. Those are the 3 things. Wash, rinse, repeat the whole time though. So you found yourself in a situation where you had a company that was liquidated, didn't have a job, worked at a firm, decided you could do it better, create more optionality. It's remarkable to see how you actually did that. You know, it's a very praiseworthy way of going through life. And I think that's one of the misconceptions that people often have of entrepreneurs, is that they are guys who just get these magical ideas that beam down to them from the heavens, and poof, there you go. You have your $1 million company or $1 billion company overnight. But what they don't see is all the work and effort behind the scenes. And I don't know if it's Steve Jobs who said this, but someone in the tech industry said something along the lines of, any overnight success takes years to create. So when you see a big movie, for instance, like let's use Avengers Endgame, for example, that's the biggest one at the box office, 2.7 billion at the box office. You can often hear, wow, what an overnight success. That took decades to create. I mean, if you look at the planning and everything else, well, I mean, I would like you to build onto that. What are your thoughts on that whole notion, you know, the whole overnight success? Because I'm sure you might have come across that before, where someone called you an overnight success, or any of these things, or you've seen someone who seems like an overnight success. I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the first thing is to define success. Sorry if I'm getting philosophical. I think
No, please go ahead.
By most of society's standards, success is measured in either the power you hold or how much money you've made, particularly in business, let's call it. And if you're measuring success like that, then my feeling is that there are very, very few people who have become overnight successes. Like, it would take an incredible amount of luck. I've never come across anyone who's been an overnight success personally. I think, you hear of stories, guys like maybe in Wall Street who took big trades and maybe made big bets on certain stocks and those type of things. That is, I think, that is very, I mean, even the experience that they've needed to build to get to that point takes a very long time. Mm-hmm. I think there are very few guys who are overnight successes. Everyone loves to sensationalize it, like, oh yeah, I mean, it only took, Jeff Bezos, like, look how successful it is. It's only 20 years. Yeah, it's 20 years, but remember, he was grafting. He was 40, like almost 45 when he started Amazon. Like he was, or maybe I lied, maybe he was 35.
Yeah, but I mean, he
had already given a lot of his time to get to that point, and like, there's no such thing as an overnight success. What it does what I think a big point that you raised is optionality, which I would kind of say is a function or a byproduct of opportunity. When you tend to start businesses, or you have no choice but to survive, like you have to pay bills at the end of the month, and that forces you to think outside of, it forces you to generate options. It forces you to actually sit and think about opportunity, because you're like, shit, I can't pay this. What do I do? I can't pay salaries. What do I do? Like, and your mind actually becomes conditioned, I think, to look for opportunity everywhere you are, because you have no choice. It's a survival mechanic, right? And through that opportunity, you start seeing more and more options. And and that's, I think, for me, opportunity and optionality kind of like interlink like this. The more people you meet, the more connections you have. And I'm not saying go out and be like a network freak. I'm certainly not. I think there is power in that, for sure, the size of your network and all those things. But it's just about like, shit, I've got to do this. Like, we have to think about what are our options as a business to survive, or what are our options to generate more income, or what are our options to build a better culture. And it actually forces you to create a list. There's a great principle. A friend of mine's called Brett Field. He's a chief innovation officer at Fed Group. He's got a great methodology for generating options or ideas. And it's basically like, you have to get to 100. So if you want to like solve for something, generate 100 ideas, and you'll find very quickly that the first 50 or 60 come quite quickly, but the last 40 are really tough. And that's when you really start thinking outside the box and thinking and developing your options. The last 10 are like squeezing like water out of a rock, but those are the ones that generally actually are quite good, because your mind is automatically, we're lazy creatures. Like we don't like thinking.
Absolutely.
We don't like thinking. So it actually forces us to go to places that we're not going to. But the point is that I'm trying to make is when you do these things, you do, because of this, because of the need for these options you tend to find opportunity in everything, even in times of COVID, even in times of crisis, actually more so in times of crisis.
Yeah.
You tend to find opportunity. If you go work for a corporate, nothing wrong with that. Seriously, there's nothing wrong with that. But you tend to be, probably depending on where you are in sort of the seniority of your position, you tend to be boxed into quite a closed ecosystem, if that makes sense. And obviously it also depends on your role. And that can provide you options, but it tends to provide you options within quite a closed environment, within the confines of that business or that business structure. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you have no choice but to look outside those constructs to survive. That's my feeling, at least.
No, I do agree with you, and it's very interesting you mentioned the ecosystem, the constructs within corporates, and all corporates started out as entrepreneurs. If you really think about it, though, I mean, all of them did. Whether it's a bank or a mine or any, there had to be an entrepreneurial spirit, but somehow once they become big enough, they lose that spirit. You know, it's really, to me, it's kind of bizarre how often that happens. And tech companies seem to be the exclusion to the rule a lot of the time. But if you look at banks, for instance, many banks still use a programming language called COBOL, which is from the 60s, for heaven's sake. And they still have not switched over to more efficient things such as your Pythons or sometimes even Java. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Java, but at least that's far more ahead of COBOL in so many ways. And I heard someone reference to this as being the dinosaur syndrome. We're so big, we don't need to change. If there's any change that needs to come, we'll be able to adapt quickly. Well, we saw how well that worked out for the dinosaurs, you know, which is why we're here, and they're not. if I can put it that way. So I suppose from that perspective, there is also, there comes a tipping point as well where there's a sweet spot between still having that entrepreneurship and innovative spirit before you become so big where it becomes very hard to shift and change. And I don't know if you have a way of defining that point. I certainly don't, but But I think that is always something to look out for, especially if you want to go and build your own companies and things, before it becomes a matter of becoming too cumbersome, where you get stopped by internal rules and regulations and board meetings and all that stuff. It's like what Richard Branson said. He took Virgin public, but he hated what he had done to his own company, because every idea that he wanted to pass had to go through a board meeting, and every idea had to be approved and this and that. He said he actually took it back private again, gave the investors back all their money, because he wanted to be able to sit on his houseboat and line his hammock and say, screw it, let's do it. So what are your thoughts on that, Brad?
I mean, there's a really interesting book, and the name slips me now, all around innovation. I mean, there's tons of books around innovation, but there's a very famous one talking about like Kodak and about how companies actually get to a point of innovation and then start like dying out. And that's why they don't survive. I must really get the name for you. I've got it, and it slips me right now, but I will find it and I'll send it. But I mean, that's very like, it's quite academic and quite a difficult read, but it actually teaches you a lot about, you know, our perception of innovation, what we think it is. I think cultures are changing. So I think the tech industry per se does get it right. And I think it actually boils down to culture, right? Like at the end of the day, like it's a very easy thing to say, but take, oh man, I hate using this fucking example. Sorry, excuse my language.
No,
like,
go. Speak freely.
Like Apple.
Speak freely.
Like Apple, right? Like Apple, like if you look at why Apple was so innovative, it boils down to culture. And Steve Jobs was a very, very strong leader there. I'm not saying Tim Cook and them haven't done some great stuff, but like I personally don't feel Apple have launched anything really fantastic since like the iPhone. No. Like if you think about it, like they've taken something good and they're building on it and doing better, but they're not truly like innovating at the moment.
They've become a cash cow.
They become a cash cow. And I think this is also boils down to the point that we perceive innovation as these things that need to be big and grand and like, oh, you need to have like you need to be continuously like thinking
Elon
about
Musk.
big grand new products ideas and like and Elon Musk, and like those are amazing things. Those are amazing ideas. But innovation in my mind is actually just like it's a perpetual state. Actually, at Valenture, the company that I'm at the moment, like we've actually got a value that says innovation is our perpetual state. And what that means is we're always looking to do things better. And what it actually means is that if every single person or every single department just tries to think a little bit differently, just tries to change things for the better, all of those little things add up into something that's a big change. Big change doesn't happen overnight. It happens when it's a sum, it's a compound of all of those small things. I mean, you're in finance, it's like compound interest, right?
Absolutely.
The first like 20 years doesn't look very interesting, but after that, you start getting that like that
exponential growth, yeah.
And that's what innovation happens. It's an add up of all of those small little things. How are companies getting too big and too stale? I mean, that was very much corporate America in the 70s, 80s. Like it worked. It worked. There was nothing wrong with it. It worked. But with the rate of change and the rate of technology, and the amount of capital that's been poured into technology, like they thought they were invincible. And I think what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between process and bureaucracy. Process is highly necessary when you want to build a big company. You have to have processes. You have to have board meetings. You have to have like structures in place. But you don't need to have unnecessary process and structures in place. And I think that's where the fine line becomes. Is when something doesn't make sense anymore, there's no logic to have it there, why do we have it? And also just becoming complacent. It's like, oh, we're making hay while the sun shines, like business is good. So don't ever become complacent, because there's an entrepreneur or there's a business person who's hungry to just, I'm not going to use a disrupt word, to make a change. He sees a problem with what you're doing, or she sees a problem with what you're doing, and they're going to come after you. So don't become complacent.
What you just reminded me of, there are two things. Do you remember a recording artist called Fatboy Slim? From we would have been
100%.
We would have been little
100%.
tykes when that came out. But Fatboy Slim had this single, Right Here Right Now, where he had that Chinese looking guy walking with that shirt that said, "I'm number one, so why try harder?" And I think that is the epitome of what's happened to some large companies. Kodak being a prime example. We're number one, so why try harder? Blockbuster, we're number one, why try harder? Even some countries, if you look back in history, you can even notice the fall of some empires that actually took place when they had the Roman Empire being a prime example. The Ottoman, Mongol, we're number one. We're good. We've got this covered. And that is often something that really stops them. And the second thing, what you mentioned, reminded me of a scene from a movie called Rocky Balboa, where I can see you remember that movie well. There was a scene where Mason Dixon, the current world champion, went to his old gym and he spoke to his coach Marvin, and Marvin said to him, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of, "Pride is what got you out of here, and pride is what brought you back." And he said, "Men like you need to be tested. You need to be challenged." And he said, "Yeah, but there's no one who can challenge me. You know that." He said, "Oh, there's always someone out there, always." And he said, and this gives me goosebumps when I think about it, though, because it's so applicable to everything we do in our daily lives. This next line, whether you're an entrepreneur, sports person, a financier, he said, when the time comes and you're facing something in front of you and it's hitting on you and hitting on you and it's not quitting and you feel like you're too damn tired to breathe, he said, that's good, because that's baptism under fire. And he said, you get through that and you'll find the only respect that matters in this damn world, self-respect. What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel that is exactly what this embodies.
Yeah, no, there is. I mean, that's great. I mean, it's firstly, you're giving away a lot of our age, so thanks. Fatboy Slim will always remind me of Cruel Intentions. I don't know if you remember that movie for some reason.
Yes.
But,
yes.
Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make, I think to your point, I mean, like, it's very difficult. Like, I think businesses, sorry, just to go quickly back to the business thing, like businesses now are going to have shorter lifespans, in my opinion. Like, like we look at Facebooks, we look at the Amazons, there will be another Amazon that will replace the existing Amazon. There will be another Facebook to replace the existing Facebook. There will be another Apple to replace the existing Apple. Like it's very rare that you find companies that are like 100+ years old. And that's just evolution. Like
it's a true point. Sorry to interject here, but just to build onto your point, that if you were to, what's one of the worst ideas for people who invest is they have this notion, I'll just buy and hold this company forever. It doesn't actually work because the average lifespan of a company on the S&P 500 is 30 years. And so you can buy an index maybe, and that will last for a while. But if you think you're going to buy into a company into perpetuity, as you said, no, it's not going to work.
And we have to accept that. So to go back to your business, when you become too big, too incumbent, like what do? Like you need to, I think as society, we need to learn to accept, just like we accept death and that we live till 80 or 100 or 120, hopefully in the future, or even 140. Like at some point things end, and it ends for big companies as well, no matter how. Yes, the reason you last longer is probably because you were more innovative than you were. But I mean, you look at guys like Facebook and stuff now, like you also become too arrogant, you start, and sorry, that's one point we didn't touch on, and I will get back to a Rocky Balboa thing, is the shareholding thing and going public. I think that is where big companies make their mistake, because what big companies are forced to do is to return value to shareholders, mostly. Outside of Amazon, which is an exception, people were following the vision there and not the bottom line. You know what I mean? Like they were getting very cheap capital and valuations, and shareholders were very forgiving when they didn't hit target. I mean, if Walmart didn't hit a target, it would be a bloodbath. But Amazon were forgiven a lot of the time for doing that. So outside of those few exceptions, the problem is when you go public, and that's probably why Virgin also delisted, is because your focus now becoming is returning value to shareholders and not returning value to customers. And therefore, you're not actually focusing on how do I serve my customer better, how do I become more innovative and better and give them a better product or service. You focus on how do I make more money to give to shareholders, or make sure I hit my targets. And the funny thing is that if you actually do focus on your customer more, the money will come, but sometimes it doesn't. And therefore you put under pressure. So yeah, for me, I really don't like, listing is great. And it's great to have investors on board, but if you can maintain control wherever possible, if you're an entrepreneur, it's really important, right? To maintain control. And we saw that, once again, keep going back to Apple. We saw that with that example. Like when Steve Jobs got kicked out of that business, it faltered. It really did not have a good run. And when it came back, he flipped it. So yeah, it's super, super interesting. To go back to your point, I think what you're trying to say about pride and like when you're being hit over and over and over and over again, that really boils down to persistence, right? Like I'm going to sound like a fucking Apple junkie, which I'm not actually, but it's like
use Apple. Everyone knows it, so you just use it.
It's like Steve Jobs said, like he believes that what makes success, something I'm also paraphrasing loosely, the difference between he believes that at least the key difference between people who succeed or don't succeed, or entrepreneurs that succeed and don't succeed, is it boils down to basically persistence. That's it. Like 50% of success boils down to persistence, if not more. I'll try to find the same for you.
Well, that sounds pretty accurate to me as well, but it's also, I think that's definitely accurate, but as Ralph Waldo Emerson also said something, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. So you also need to be persistent in a pursuit that actually is going to deliver returns. Otherwise, you're going to keep bashing your head against the wall. And I think that's what you're trying to say as well. Find a pursuit that is actually worthwhile, and then be persistent before you become good. It's like, for instance, I do a martial art called jiu-jitsu. Well, I used to, before COVID and all that this nonsense. And let me tell you one thing.
Nice close contact grappling on the ground there. Huh?
Oh yeah, so you're very familiar with that. Yeah. Let me tell you one thing, Brad. That jiu-jitsu has been one of the most humbling and enlightening things that I've ever done. Though it is incredibly demoralizing to get absolutely smashed up by guys who are much smaller than yourself, often much weaker than yourself as well. But it's actually incredibly encouraging and empowering when you go up against a guy who's got 50 kilograms on you or something, and you can actually toy with that person as if as if it's nothing. So it's what I learned from jiu-jitsu as well is pivoting as well. If one submission or one move doesn't work, you've got another set of things in your arsenal. If you're under pressure, find a way to escape from it. Learn that just because someone's got a hold on you at the moment, it's not the end of the world. You can find a way out of it. It also teaches you a lot of humility, that you're never too good to learn more. You're never too strong. You're never too skilled. It's like this one guy who went to a famous gym in the States, the Machado brothers. They are cousins of the Gracies. And he publicly announced after he got his black belt, I've learned everything there is to learn about jiu-jitsu. And the funny thing is that he was so ridiculed and so denounced for having done that. And I think that that's something similar that happens in business as well, because you were alluding to there will be another Facebook and there will be another Amazon. Well, Facebook is the next Facebook if you think about it, because MySpace, everyone forgets about MySpace. MySpace was ginormous compared to Facebook. And where's MySpace today? It's a little music hosting website, if that. They went from how many users, 200 or 300 million users or more, to zip, and literally in less than a decade. So yeah, you're right. You've always got to keep up the competitive spirit. Never get to that point where you feel, I'm number one. Let's fall back, and I mean, enjoy the laurels of your success, but never become complacent. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned as well, is never to become complacent.
Yeah. I think you've summed it up really well. And I think it ties back into pivoting. So it's not a word, I think it's quite a hype word, but it's a word that's used a lot, is pivoting. But basically it's like, we've got to, unless you have a hunger to learn and learn every day, like that's probably why big businesses fail. Probably, like, to sum it up, my opinion is probably the reason big businesses fail is because that is tied to innovation, but because they either think they know everything or they don't learn. They don't have a continuous desire to learn. And it's weird, like that. I told you, my stepdad, he's been quite a huge impact on my life from a business perspective and obviously elsewhere. But he's 76 now. He just listed his second company at 72. And he said to me his favorite part about getting up every day and going to work is that he's going to learn something new. And that is just like, it's exactly that. He goes to work not to be the most knowledgeable person in the room, but to actually learn from others. Like, it's as simple as that. And for me, pivoting is understanding what learnings or taking the signals from very strong learnings and shifting your company or your strategy towards those. So it's being able to differentiate. I'm making a shit ton of mistakes. I'm learning a lot. Which one of those learnings keep hitting me on the head over and over and over again? And how do I then shift to either like recognize that it's a good signal and I must go there, or it's a bad signal and I must move away from it, which is basically a pivot. And if you bring it back down to the jiu-jitsu analogy, it's the same thing. You've got an opponent who keeps doing the same move on you over and over again.
Yeah.
You're not going to keep repeating the same defense. You're going to keep trying different things, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And yeah, you made a very good point there. If it's the same move and stuff, you'll know how to defend against it after a while, because we all have a signature move. Each and every one of us will focus on our strengths and our signature moves. I think it's a very human nature kind of thing. And you find it in all aspects of life, whether you go to gym and you find someone who only trains upper body or only trains legs because it's the easiest thing to do, or you only read certain material, you'll even in trading terms, in my field, I personally prefer not to muck around with instruments that I have no understanding of, because why am I going to risk losing losing money, and when it's already a risk whenever you place a bet on any particular instrument on the markets. And there are so many things in markets that are not making sense at the moment, to be very honest with you. You look at something like the S&P 500 being 300 points away from the highs, while the entire world is essentially burning from an economic sense. You look at America burning at the moment with all the riots and the looting and all that stuff, but the markets just keep going up due to excess liquidity from central banks. They're
Well, it's a
buying
stimulus, right? It's a
Absolutely.
stimulus. But it's a false stimulus.
Yeah, I used the steroid analogy in one of my in a podcast that I went to hosted by a guy called David Bell from Macrodesiac. Well worth watching his podcast. This guy knows a hell of a lot, and he's become a good mate. He said that, for instance, central banks, especially here in the Western world, have directly led to an increase in house prices due to the fact that people with capital can go and take out loans and prop up their home prices, while the average person has suffered big time due to a massive increase in the cost of housing, while their salaries have remained pretty much stagnant, if not decreased in value. Has something similar happened in South Africa? Because I think the interest rates are not quite as low as what they are here. I mean, the Bank of England has got 0.1% base rate. I mean, it's ridiculously low compared to what it is in South Africa. So my tip to you would be, for instance, if you want to loan money, just lend some money over here and then put it in the bank. Put it in the bank in South Africa, get a yield, and then you pay back your loan.
100%. I wish it was that easy, but Africa.
Yeah, I know.
Controls. The problem is we've got very, really hectic exchange controls. Not so much for inflows, but more for outflows, as you know. I mean, listen, interest rates are coming down here. They've come down about, I stand to correction, I think 250 basis points over the last year. So I mean, we're sitting at an interest rate of 7.5%, which is still very high.
Is that the prime one?
That's the prime, yeah. So that means I don't know what the repo is, but that's the prime.
Probably about 4.5, around about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's much lower than it. I mean, people have got 25% more affordability than they used to have, right? If you think about it in those terms, because it was at 10% about a year ago. But they need to, because they need to stimulate the economy. The problem is that, like, we've got huge inequality here as everywhere else in the world. And people with cash at the moment are going to do very well. The market here, at least in Cape Town, because it's a market that I watch closely, the property market I'm talking about specifically, is coming down quite substantially because of COVID, especially in the higher tiers. But it needed correction because it was growing at 20% year on year. It was not affordable. I mean, you're looking at like a 2-bedroom apartment in Cape Town is like 3 million rand.
So for those who, in dollar terms, we're looking at roughly, it's about $150,000, roughly speaking, that we're looking at.
Yeah, $200,000, roughly $200,000. But your income is nowhere. You've got to be earning quite a big income to start paying that off, because your interest rates are so high. Your interest rates are 10%. You're paying off interest every year. But I mean, your point is the markets aren't making sense, especially the overseas, the US market. I mean, I got a statement from a fund I'm invested in the US yesterday, and I opened it this morning, and I fell off my chair. It's like performance over May was 9.1% in 1 month. I mean, that's what you typically want to get in a year, let alone in a month. So it's absolutely crazy. I don't know how we got into this conversation, but
no, we were talking about how a lot of things are not making sense, and how you stick to what you know and all that stuff. But even now, I'm finding that markets are really not making sense. And I've traded the S&P 500 for a number of years now, and quite honestly, I just feel I don't trust what I see. It just feels absolutely ridiculous due to the incredible amounts of stimulus. And stimulus is sort of like, as I said, I use a steroid analogy. It's liquidity is obviously very important, as you would know. And I think that is what's also happened especially in emerging markets and third world countries. A lot of liquidity has just been sucked out of the system and being brought back to first world places, like especially in dollar terms. I mean, one of the reasons, for instance, why the dollar has gone up so much against other currencies is because of a shortage of dollars in the global market system. I mean, everything is paid for in dollars. So if there's no trade going on, there's no dollars in circulation. What happens when a commodity becomes scarce? It goes up in value. So all these things are having a knock-on effect on everything else. Sorry, go ahead, Brad.
No. I mean, you're 100% right. It doesn't make sense, and that's the whole thing about economics. It doesn't. Capitalism was not designed to be turned off. And COVID turned it off. It was not meant to have an off switch. The whole system is built on credit, as you quite rightly know. So capitalists have got like, and now we're really getting into like politics and then sort of like philosophy and then conspiracy,
That's okay.
which I don't want to get into. Like I'm not, but like, let's be honest, like the elite control the finances of the world. Like you can shift and shape it any way you want. And they've got two choices. When capitalism gets turned off, what the hell are they going to do? They stand to lose everything, or they must make decisions to pump huge amounts of artificial stimulus / steroid into the system to keep it from falling over and losing everything they've got. So that's what they do. And that's why it doesn't make sense. But I think to go back to your point of sticking to what you know, I think you can still learn every day. You can still take those learnings and pivot, but it doesn't mean you have to go into something you don't know. And I'll use another famous person. I'll use Warren Buffett for this one. Like an avid reader, known to read like exceptional amounts.
I heard, yeah.
Like apparently the guy is like just a Trojan, and he reads outside of his sphere. He reads inside of his sphere of knowledge. He learns a lot outside of his sphere, but when it comes to investing, he'll only ever invest in something he knows. And I think the point there is you can still learn a lot outside of what you know, but you've also got to stick to what you know to a point. Yeah, but that comes down to optionality, right? I mean, I say that, but I don't know a lot about digital marketing, and I fell into it. I don't know a lot about education, but I've now found myself in the edtech.
I wanted to ask you how you got into that field, though, because I mean, you've gone from digital marketing now to being in education, and if there's one field that can give you a hell of a lot of optionality, it's education. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about going to university and getting a degree. You know, I think that model's also slowly but surely starting to fall away. And over here in the UK, it's an incredibly expensive model, especially if you go to Uxbridge or Imperial College and all that. I mean, I don't mean to be funny, but if you look at an MBA, at some places an MBA costs anywhere between 75 to 80,000 pounds per year. It's crazy to think that people are willing to spend that. And I ask myself this question: is the cost benefit really worth it for you? I'm struggling to say yes. Sometimes if you're lucky and well connected, I think yes. But if you have no connections, no other real prospects and stuff, and you just go and spend that amount of money and think that's going to be your golden ticket, I personally disagree. But some people.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there's a lot in that, what you've asked. I mean, the first part is, how did I find myself in education? I think being in a marketing or digital environment, I've had to work across a lot of sectors. And what you do is you tend to pick up knowledge in each of those. I've worked in the finance sector, I've worked in the alcohol sector, I've worked in retail. And like you learn, because you have to learn about those sectors to give your customers competitive advantage. So that's a beautiful thing about being in a service, probably one of the few beautiful things about being in the service industry is that you get exposure to a lot of other businesses outside of your own, and you learn how they operate. I mean, I know more about paint and alcohol than I ever thought I'd known in my entire life. Like, and you learn about their margins, and you learn about the taxes, and you learn about everything, and that's awesome. And that's what I'm saying. And so, but I was still sticking to what I knew. I was still sticking to digital, and within the context of those businesses. Education I fell into because a friend of mine, Robert Paddock, started a company called Get Smarter with his brother down in South Africa. Get Smarter is basically a company that took university courses and put them online, short courses for professionals. You want to do a course on artificial intelligence for 10 weeks, you come and you do it. We'll take Harvard's or MIT's content, we'll repackage it and repurpose it for online learning specifically, and you still get a certificate from Harvard, right? They subsequently went and sold that business to a Nasdaq listed company called 2U for $110 million about 3 years ago. So they did exceptionally well for a South African business. And you talk about overnight success. It took them 8 years, which seems short, but they worked incredibly hard.
It's a while.
It's a while. So anyway, he started this business now, which is a global online high school called Valenture. And to go to your point around education, the future of education, one of our few goals is to say, we don't want to I hate using the disrupt, but we don't challenge tertiary education. There's a need for tertiary for some things. Like if you want to become a doctor, you need to have a tertiary education.
Absolutely.
But the point is that the world, you've seen it now, even with COVID, it's probably fast-tracked it. The skills that are required for the jobs of the future are vastly different. And I don't even think we understand what those look like. Like I know everyone talks about 4IR stealing jobs and blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. Like we're humans, we've got tenacity.
I agree with you on that.
No, we've got skills that humans won't need. That computers can't replicate. Creative thinking, problem solving, people skills. Those are the skills for the future. And how do we readapt education for those, number one? But also, we also realize that education is a continuous journey. It's not, I go to school, I go get a tertiary degree, I'm educated. Like it doesn't work that way. It is a continuous journey. To bring it back down to tertiary, there's a great guy, an amazing writer, author, blogger, professor, Scott Galloway. I don't know if you ever read his stuff.
I'm very familiar with Scott Galloway's work. He's very sharp.
He's sharp. He wrote a book called The Fall, which is also on all the 4 big tech companies. And he actually wrote an article, I think 2 or 3 years ago, because he works at a prestigious university.
NYU, if I recall correctly.
Correct, yeah, spot on. And he's basically turned around saying how these businesses are now pretty much going to be dead. He believes that only 20 or 30 are going to survive, because people are like, basically what COVID's done is, and the internet's done is, it's democratized education. People start sitting there and go, hold on a second, I've got a Harvard lecturer willing to give me an online lecture and teach me for 1/100th of the cost of going to Harvard.
Yeah.
So why am I spending money to go to Harvard outside of conspicuous consumption and status? Why am I actually spending this money? And that brings it back down to your MBA point. Like also MBAs in the 70s and 80s were highly prized because they were rare, they were difficult, not everyone could get in. Like now they've also become democratized. I see freaking everyone, and I'm not saying getting an MBA is an easy thing. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just saying
far from it.
Certain universities have democratized it where it's like, oh, I can do an online MBA with the University of Liverpool. And now all of a sudden you've got everyone running around with the title, and that title actually, because of these democratizations, actually diluted the credibility of the guys who are actually getting the really, really good MBAs and putting in the graft. I mean, MBA specifically, there's been tons of articles written on the value of them, and whether you ever actually do make the return back or not. The one thing that comes out, sorry about my child in the background.
That's okay. That's okay, Daddy.
The one thing that does come back from every single person I've spoken to who's done an MBA, every single one of them, is firstly it teaches you that you've got to put into something.
Oh, sorry, there you are. Yeah, I lost you for a second. It just said the internet connection is unstable.
No, I was just
no, you're back.
No worries. I was just saying that MBA everyone I've spoken to who's got an MBA say it does teach you the value of hard work, but also what they really got out of it was the network.
And that's what you pay for a lot of the time.
You pay for in Adrian terms, you pay for the optionality.
Yes, exactly. And funny enough, I knew a guy in Cape Town as well, who studied at Stanford, and he said that what he derived the most from his MBA was essentially the alumni network, more than the education. Because I asked him exactly this question was, is the curriculum so different at Stanford relative to NYU? Or he said, no, it's pretty much exactly the same thing. It's just the alumni network. He said, he used an example. He said he was roommates with the 5th employee at YouTube or something like that. You know, he says these are the kind of things that you get when you study that, and that's the optionality that you just alluded to. far more so than the actual curriculum. And Talib, the guy who wrote Black Swan, he also said something along the lines of that the edge does not fall within the curriculum, but what's outside of it. And he said he looks for people. He looked for people when he had funds and stuff, who read books that did not fall inside of the curriculum, who also did activities that would not fall inside it, because he said that is where the edge lies, and he said that is where the real treasures lie and stuff. And I mean, even my whole company name, Black Heart Red Spade, is based on a similar idea. And I got the idea from a movie called Interstate 60, Episodes of the Road. It's a movie that not many people have watched, but it's one of these indie kind of films that are really are thought-provoking, where this lead character, to give a brief summary, wishes on his 22nd birthday for an answer to his life. And the guy who played by Gary Oldman, who grants him his wish, called OW Grant, or One Wish Grant, he lets a bucket drop on his head, and he lands up in hospital, and he wakes up, and there's a guy who's got this deck of cards, and he said, I'm going to hold up a deck of cards, call out a suit, I'm going to go faster and faster. And he said, like, okay. So he goes diamond, heart, spade, club, so on and so forth. And at the end of the test, the guy asks, oh, so did I pass? He says, no, but few people do. And then he showed him two cards, one with black hearts and red spades. And he said, black hearts and red spades? Come on, that's cheating. He said, nah, experience has conditioned you into thinking that all hearts are red and all spades are black. And it's easier for your mind to interpret them being similar than based on their shapes, than be open to the idea that they can be different. And I don't want to go into the whole story. I think the movie is well worth watching if you want to see these kind of things. But what it boils down to, that he said, is once you can see black hearts and red spades, you'll be able to perceive them. And he said it makes you wonder how many sights, smells, sounds, and things are right in front of your very eyes you can't see because you've been conditioned not to see them. And I think in business terms, as an entrepreneur and stuff, COVID, for instance, has created a lot of shit in the world, let's be honest. But it's also created immense opportunity. And as Sun Tzu, the guy who wrote The Art of War, said, amongst all the chaos, there is always opportunity. And I think this is where Black Heart Red Spade it came from COVID. I've had the name for a while and stuff, but it came out of COVID. I mean, your idea for Platinum Seed came from the financial crisis. So if there's a common thread and link that binds these kind of ideas and these kind of companies that eventually get built into larger firms. And it's just really interesting to see how we've had similar things in similar ways. It's not the same, but similar. Oh, your audio.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, no, I think you summed it up really nicely there. It is like perception and how we change that, and our conditioning of our minds, and even the way we live our lives. I think we're conditioned to be like, we have to see people, we have to do this every weekend, and like COVID's changed that. And financial, unfortunately, sometimes it takes big changes to change our perception. And to your point, like great things come out of it if you're willing to look for the opportunity. And I think that's what we continue to try to do, right? You just continue to look for the opportunity, and not look for the opportunity. You continue to be presented with opportunities, or you choose. You make a conscious choice to look at things differently, because you don't actually, because you want to succeed. You want to make, and bear in mind, success is not like, I'm not talking about success about your bank balance. Like when you've got a business, it's like a child. It's not about money. People often perceive like entrepreneurs as these capitalists, like pigs who don't have any integrity, and some are, but the majority of entrepreneurs are just really want to see their vision come to life. There's more success in getting validation that, holy shit, I'm solving for something and other people are appreciating that. And the icing on top is that they're willing to pay for it because they see value in it. But the fact that they're actually just already even consider it is like such validation. It's such a self-actualization. It's such a feeling of self-actualization.
No, I agree with you on that. And to me, for instance, I mean, with my newsletter and my this podcast and things that I'm doing is I'm looking at adding value to people's lives as well, and the optionality that I get from it. And if people sign up for my newsletter and paid, I've got a brilliant partner called Jamie Glancy. He's 21 and he already knows a lot more about my own field than what I did at that age. I mean, if I look at what I was doing at 21 relative to the books that he's reading and all that stuff, I'm like, whoa. I feel I feel like I lost a lot of time over the years that I could have spent more productively. But Jamie, for instance, he mentioned to me, for instance, when I spoke to you, he wanted to know how you, at Valenture, for instance, overcome the homeschooling aspect, the social aspect. How do you, is there social interaction that takes place? Because he said to him always the best part of going to school was interacting with people and meeting new people.
Let me ask you a quick question. How have you found the social interaction of this call?
Great. I mean, it feels to me like we haven't lost touch or anything like that. It's just like catch up.
So this is exactly what our students experience. So I think before COVID, I think people found it harder to believe that you can still have social connection through technology. We're just fortunate that I think COVID has accelerated that a bit. But there's a huge amount of social interaction. And just to strip that back a little bit, and just to talk about Valenture just for 2 seconds, it's like there's a difference between homeschooling. I think people perceive homeschooling or remote learning. There's a difference between remote learning and online learning. Remote learning is when you get sent a bunch of material, perhaps via a computer, pre-recorded sessions, tests, quizzes, whatever, and you have to sit and learn by yourself at your own pace, and potentially your parents have to help you. And I'm talking in a high school context here. Online learning is when that is all removed. Online learning, you come and you attend a live class every day. You attend a math class, you attend an English class with your peers, you interact with them, you're put into breakout sessions. Yes, you still do some quizzes and preparation and tests online through a platform, but you've got teachers to help you, you've got mentors, you've got a huge level of support. And I think that is Valenture's kind of key differentiator, is that technology for us is just an enabler. Like technology, everyone thinks that technology is the thing, like we're a big ed tech company. It's not actually even technology. It's technology just enables us to give a lot of connection at scale, as opposed to being confined to a classroom. That's what it allows us to. I mean, we have got a huge number of employees in this business that are just dedicated to student success. We've got a mentor team where every student gets a mentor for the duration of their studies with us, a one-to-one mentor who checks in with them for an hour every week, who checks in with their parents and them for one call every month. They've got tech support teams that they can reach out to every day. They've got teachers that they can talk to every single day. They attend live sessions. So there are discussion forums and channels that are set up in our own sort of private network for students to connect and interact with one another. So to answer the question, there's a huge amount of social interaction, and there's a huge amount of human support. It's not a remote learning model where you're just left on your own to your own devices to sit and watch pre-recorded lessons. It's not that. And that's the perception we're trying to change, is that this can actually work. There's actually, I mean, we've got kids in our classes who are like from across the world. I mean, how awesome is that? You talk about optionality. Like we've got someone in a class from the UK, like some students from the UK sitting with some guys out of South Korea and Malta and South Africa. All of a sudden your network and your optionality is now global. Like it's incredible. And you're only in grade 8. I mean, think about that. Like what you would give to like create those connections usually, or those options usually. So for us, there is a huge level of social interaction. It's a question that comes up all the time with parents. My child sitting alone in their room, how can this be social? And I think COVID is actually, because the parents have now had to experience it in their own working environment, have actually realized it can work. We're not saying, and also just think about like life normally. Like you've got friends at your family, I'm assuming when you're growing up, you had family friends of where those kids weren't at your school either. You didn't only have friends in school. You had friends in circles outside of
yeah.
had cousins, you had, you know, siblings who may have had friends, you had next door neighbors. That stuff doesn't go away. You don't only make friends in school. You don't only have social interaction in school. And I think that's something that people also forget.
Absolutely, a very good point that you made there, and you know, thanks for answering that, because I think, you know, because Jamie, I know, is very if you look at some of the other episodes of the podcast, you know, he's very matter of fact, and, you know, typical options guy, you know, very, very sharp, very to the point, and he also looks at optionality, but he asks a lot of these interesting questions, and I'm very glad that you were able to address it in that manner, because it does make sense that with the types of social interactions we are having globally nowadays, it's not that big a deal. And that brings me to my other question as well, is that what do you see being the challenges going forward, you know, that COVID has created, but also the opportunities? You know, how do you see the world coming out from this? Because we are getting such bearish and bullish views, and some of them are very extreme, you know, like extreme bullish and extreme bearish, and very few in between. You know, where do you see yourself in terms of how we're going to come out of this whole COVID crisis?
I think it's tough, right? Like hindsight's always 2020. I
Yeah.
got asked that question. I got asked that question a few weeks ago, and then I started like actually looking back and like thinking about what I said, and I was basically talking about how like it was more a shift of spending habits, but and I was like, yeah, there's gonna be a big shift in spending habits, blah blah blah. And actually, now that we're starting to like ease down on lockdown, I don't know, Adrian. I don't think the world is gonna be that vastly different. I think it's going to be.
Okay.
I think it's going to be mostly be the same. I think it's accelerated certain things that were bound to happen anyway. So, remote working, I think, was bound to happen anyway. It's just accelerated that. Remote education, I think online education. I think it's accelerated that. It's accelerated. So, I mean, it's accelerated certain things that technology was going to do anyway. Once we've got a vaccine for this thing, are we going to go back to restaurants? Yes. Are we going to? I don't think we're all going to live our lives in fear of the next COVID. Like, understanding that these things may happen every 50 or 100 years, and if it does happen again, we know how to deal with it. Like what I'm trying to say is, I think there will be some people who will be worried about those things, and they may pull back. But if you are not irrational, if you think rationally about it, like, what are the odds again? If you've got a vaccine, are you just going to stop going on into society? That's not going to happen.
And exactly. And you know, I don't want to interrupt you here, but just to mention that living in a place like London, I can almost guarantee you I've had exposure to COVID. It's
100%.
Myself, my neighbors, everyone would have had exposure to it. It's impossible to live in a city, even under lockdown, of 8 to 12 million people, depending on how you calculate it, and not have that exposure to it. I certainly, and I wouldn't be surprised if you've had exposure to it in some way or form as well.
I wouldn't be surprised if I haven't, and I mean, if I have. And like, I think that's the thing. If you rationally sit back, and people are going to argue with me and be like, "You're crazy! Like, the world's so different." No. Like, the world was different after the Spanish flu. The world was different after World War I and II. It was
9/11.
9/11. Like, we'll go back. We'll fly. Yes, there's more security now at airports. Yes, we'll probably be more conscious around you know, health and germs and those type of things. Like, we may be. From an economic point of view, I think there will be some changes. And what I mean by that, I think if you look at just the basic economics, I'll take the property sector as an example. If everyone moves to remote working, or I've heard about every company you speak to is pretty much saying they're downsizing unless they own their building. Downsizing, going to like a blended model of some remote, some people coming into office. And I don't think that's just a function of COVID, by the way. They're saying, oh, we want to do social distancing and stuff. It's a function that they've realized that they can work quite productively from home on certain days. And they don't need to have huge rental, which, I mean, if you think about most companies' biggest expense, it's salaries and rent.
Yeah.
And they don't need to, if they can cut that down substantially, then they're going to, right? So where does that leave the property market and the commercial property market? There is going to be definite impact there. I think that like these guys are going to really suffer, and like, what do the value of those assets become? Like, what is the
I live
value
here
of it?
close to Canary Wharf, and let me tell you, I'm looking at some of these office spaces, and I think landlords are nipping at the moment
Well, where does
in
that keep
terms
the
of.
financial sector? Because
Uh,
who owns the building? The landlord doesn't own the building. The bank owns the building.
hmm,
And
that's a
now,
good
now the
point.
bank, now the bank goes, okay, I'm going to repossess an asset because the landlord can't pay his mortgage. But actually, the asset's worth zip because no one wants to buy it and no one wants to rent it. So what's the asset actually worth now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It becomes interesting. So, I mean, I think that'll be a longer term play, but that'll have an impact. And I think the other impact will be on salaries and jobs. You've seen it in the US. I mean, the hospitality and restaurant industry will suffer for the next 18 months or so, but people are going to want to travel again.
Of course they are. Why not?
People are going to want to go live in hotels. What do you think? I cannot wait to get on an airplane and come to London. Like, I cannot, I'm itching.
Well, you better
Like,
pay me a visit when you're here in London,
oh,
you know.
definitely. Oh,
Good,
definitely.
good.
But the point I'm trying to make is like humans are going to go back. I think for the majority
Mm.
are going to go back to normal. It's very easy to get sucked into the media and into the news,
Yeah.
and let that become your perception of life and the way.
And I
life
can
is.
tell you're not just saying that to be Mr. Positive or anything
No,
like
not at
that,
all.
because you also get those people who say things for the sake of being positive or for the sake of being negative. And this is something that I came across a lot dealing with analysts over the years. You know, from different banks and all that stuff. They often say the shit that they are expected to say, so to speak. You know, it doesn't pay their salaries if they see a freaking storm looming to say, hey guys, there's a big hurricane coming, brace yourselves. It pays their salaries to say, you know, all's good and well, no problem. But it also, when the narrative is to keep going, well, if the narrative switches and it pays their salaries to keep a negative narrative, even if there's positivity looming on the horizon, that they won't see that either. So that's what I really appreciate about talking to you, is that you don't do that whole sugarcoating or what's the opposites of sugarcoating? You know, shitcoating. let's
But there's
call it
no,
that.
yeah, there's no point. I mean, I think read a book called Factfulness. Like, you just gotta like. I don't have anything against the media, but I think humans we love getting sucked into something, man.
Oh,
Oh,
jeez. Yeah.
the new normal. What's the new normal going to look like? And like, don't get me wrong. There is going to be severe impact. There's going to be severe economic impact. People are going hungry. I feel sad for a lot of people. Like, and I'm not just saying that, there is not even here in South Africa. Like, globally,
All
there is
over.
a big problem. And I'm not going to talk about the death. People are talking about the deaths from COVID. I think the deaths from like lack of food and starvation are going to be higher than from actual COVID.
100%. 100%. I agree.
Like,
It's going to become a choice between death by COVID or death by hunger. I think
but I
death by
think
COVID is far easier.
100%. And I think the thing is that the thing is that you need to look at it just like you do in everything, even in investing. You need to look at it in short term and in medium and long term. And I think in the short term, yes, life is going to be fundamentally different.
Yeah.
In the medium term, which is like 18 to 24 months, I think like when life will be 90% of what it was before, barring some of the big changes that I've highlighted. Like, we'll go back to living. Yes, there will be changes. People will work from home more. People might be more cautious around social distancing and eating out. But for the most part, we'll go back to normal, and industries will be created to suck up a lot of jobs. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I'm very glad you also mentioned the whole AI thing as well, where you also don't think AI is just going to take everything. I mean, I, for instance, had to pivot as well from a trading kind of role, you know, because you can't find trading jobs in London and New York anymore unless you're a quantitative guy. You just can't really find them, because what they've done is they've gone more electronic. So I've had to pivot to move more into financial advisory. And, you know, these are the kind of things, and I know the word pivot is overused, but the reality is that if you build horses and carts, and you know, the automobile comes in, well, you better learn how to become a mechanic, right? Otherwise, you know, you're going to be out of a job. And I think all of us find ourselves in similar positions like that. If you think you're going to be doing the same thing 50 years from now, no, I very much doubt you will be. Those days are gone. And that's why I'm very glad I could have this chat with you, because I mean, you've gone from so many different things, and you keep on innovating, and you keep on doing new things, and you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're just changing your tires, so to speak. And that's a saying that I like to use. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just change your tires and take it from there. And yeah, and all I can say is thanks a lot for the time, Brad. I really appreciate it. And
no, I really appreciate it as well. Thanks. It's been an awesome discussion. I wish we could go on for hours. I'm sure.
Yeah, and if you have another future time slots or anything like that, we can delve into other different topics and stuff, because this is exactly the kind of optionality that I like to create for people. And I think that since we met all those years ago, and looking how we've both grown and things we've learned, freaking hell, the topics of discussion become even more interesting now, 14 years later, than what they were back then when we were more about booze and babes, so to speak.
Yeah, more about like the only options we're looking at there were tequila or Jägermeister. That's about it.
Oh gosh, yeah, and you did make quite a few good drinks. So I mean, bloody hell, it's actually nostalgic in a way to think that is how far back we go, and how long ago we actually met up and stuff. All the guys that we used to hang out with, the people we met, the celebrities. I tell those kind of stories to people now, and they're like, yeah, whatever, you didn't meet them. Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah, we did.
So yeah, but thanks so much, Brad. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, and congrats on everything you've done as well. And I'd love to have a follow up and hear a bit more about your journey.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I would be happy to tell you about that. So go and enjoy some time with Tam. What's your child's name? You never told me.
I've got two. I've got
you've got
Blake,
two now. Whoa, I'm far behind.
Blake, who's my son, and Scarlett is my daughter. She's 1, and Blake's about to turn 4. And no more, bro. You don't need more options in that field, I can tell you.
No more options in that field. Got it, everyone. So pay attention. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Brad. Have a great time.
You too.
Enjoy
Thanks,
your day.
man. Cheers. Bye.